Welcome back to the channel. What you're about to hear represents one of the most significant arms transfers in the modern Middle East, and Western intelligence communities completely missed it until the operation was already finished. We're talking about 500 Hwasong-18 intercontinental ballistic missiles, North Korea's most advanced solid-fuel ICBM to date. This weapon system proved in its 2023 test launches that it can exceed 15 kilometers in range. That's enough to reach not only Israel and US bases across the Middle East, but the American mainland itself. These 500 missiles were moved in a covert logistics operation of astonishing scale and daring. They now sit inside heavily fortified underground facilities spread across Iran, fueled, targeted, and ready for action. Let that number sink in for a moment. 500. The United States currently fields roughly 400 Minuteman III ICBMs across its entire land-based nuclear deterrent force. The arsenal Iran has just acquired from Pyongyang surpasses America's full ground-based strategic nuclear stockpile. And unlike the Minuteman III, which sits in well-known fixed silos that Russian and Chinese war planners have mapped and targeted for decades, these Hwasong-18 launchers are road mobile. They move, they hide, they can be. These launchers are constantly repositioned and redeployed across Iran's vast territory in ways that make a preemptive strike almost impossible without real-time, high-quality intelligence that no current satellite system can reliably deliver. This morning, Israel woke up to an entirely new strategic reality compared to the one they faced the night before. The overwhelming qualitative military edge that Washington has guaranteed and supported for the past half-century, the assurance that Israel would always maintain superior weapon systems and delivery capabilities over any combination of regional adversaries, has just been erased by a single transfer deal between two heavily sanctioned and isolated states that the West spent decades trying to keep apart. The question now occupying every defense ministry from Tel Aviv to Washington to Riyadh in emergency sessions isn't whether this transfer happened. Satellite imagery, signals, intercepts, and reports from multiple independent sources have confirmed it beyond any doubt. The question being asked with barely concealed panic is what happens next? What will Israel do when faced with an adversary armed with 500 nuclear-capable ICBMs, guided by a system that no missile defense architecture in the Middle East was built to intercept? What will Washington do when the deterrence framework it has maintained in the region for 50 years suddenly confronts an arsenal that rewrites every calculation at once? Tonight's analysis dives deep into the transfer itself. We'll examine exactly how it unfolded, why Western intelligence failed to stop it, what the Hwasong-18 truly represents as a weapon system, and the broad strategic consequences for Israel, the United States, and the entire global order. The world changed overnight. This is what that change actually means. Three key questions will guide the entire discussion tonight. First, how did North Korea and Iran manage to transfer 500 of the world's most advanced solid-fuel ICBMs without triggering any Western intervention? Second, what do the Hwasong-18's real technical capabilities mean for Israel's defense structure and America's ability to project power across the Middle East? Third, now that Iran possesses the largest road-mobile ICBM force outside Russia and China, what realistic options remain for Washington and Tel Aviv? And is there any path forward that doesn't lead to armed conflict? Are we heading straight into the most dangerous nuclear confrontation since the Cuban Missile Crisis? The answers aren't encouraging, but they're essential. If this channel has given you sharp analysis that cuts through official propaganda and mainstream defense commentary, now is the perfect time to make sure you don't miss any updates. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share this video with everyone in your network who genuinely wants to understand what's really unfolding at the intersection of global power competition. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you believe the next moves will be from Tehran, Pyongyang, Tel Aviv, and a Washington that's running out of options faster than any official policymaker is willing to admit publicly. The transfer, how North Korea armed Iran with the world's most dangerous ICBM. To grasp how this transfer was pulled off without provoking Western intervention, you need to understand two things at once: the genuine limits of Western intelligence gathering against deeply compartmentalized operations between sanctioned states and the extraordinary measures both Pyongyang and Tehran took to keep the effort hidden until it was complete. The movement of these Hwasong-18 missiles didn't happen overnight. It marked the culmination of a steadily deepening partnership between North Korea and Iran that accelerated sharply after the 2018 collapse of the JCPOA nuclear deal and reached a new level of operational intimacy following North Korea's successful artillery deliveries to Russian forces in Ukraine. That operation gave Pyongyang both hard currency and the confidence that large-scale covert weapons shipments were feasible. Successful operations under Western surveillance exploit three specific vulnerabilities in intelligence coverage. The first is geographic. The main transfer route ran overland through Chinese territory, where Beijing either wasn't fully informed or chose not to scrutinize Central Asian movements closely, then continued via Iranian-controlled corridors and Russian transit permissions into northwest Iran. This path deliberately bypassed maritime choke points where U.S. naval interdiction assets are concentrated and avoided airspace under heavy American monitoring. It threaded precisely through the seams between U.S. intelligence priorities gaps that exist because no American policymaker wants to formally task resources against Chinese territory at the level needed to track this kind of overland logistics. The second vulnerability is timing. The transfer unfolded in multiple phases over 14 months, with individual shipments kept below the thresholds that would automatically trigger escalation from U.S. intelligence analysts. No single batch was large enough to sound the alarm that would have gone off if the entire quantity had moved at once. By the time aggregated analysis from various transport reports painted the full picture, the campaign was already over. The third vulnerability was deception. North Korean and Iranian technical teams deliberately maintained normal activity levels at known missile production and storage sites throughout the operation. Satellite images of those facilities showed no unusual patterns. The actual transfers occurred from secondary sites whose existence Western intelligence either didn't know about or whose activity was masked by deliberate electronic deception measures. As a result, the Western intelligence community, the most heavily resourced collection and analysis apparatus in human history, missed the delivery of 500 ICBMs until the weapons were already inside Iran's hardened, dispersed facilities and largely immune to detection. Conventional military action no longer includes a straightforward, large-scale bombing campaign of the scale and duration that would risk catastrophic escalation. Once the transfer was confirmed, emergency meetings were convened simultaneously in Washington, Tel Aviv, London, and every Gulf capital with a significant U.S. military presence. Those discussions didn't produce a clean plan. What they produced was the sobering realization that no option is perfect and every feasible choice carries costs so high that acting on it would require accepting consequences. No Western government is currently positioned to bear. Politically, Iran's public statement after confirming the transfer was carefully worded but carried devastating strategic weight. Tehran didn't hold victory press conferences announcing missile launches. They simply allowed verification to spread through intelligence channels and let the strategic implications speak for themselves. That restraint was itself a message proof of the confidence that comes from knowing the objective has been achieved and nothing their adversaries can do now can undo it. The Hwasong-18, inside the weapon that could render every defense system obsolete. The Hwasong-18 became the focus of global strategic discussion in April 2023, when North Korea conducted its first public test launch under Kim Jong-un's direct supervision. What that test revealed, and what Western analysts later confirmed through remote sensing data and trajectory reconstruction, was a weapon system representing a genuine leap forward in North Korean ballistic missile capabilities and more broadly in what any actor can achieve. To understand why the Hwasong-18 is fundamentally different from every previous Iranian ballistic missile and why it renders Israel's current defenses obsolete against this specific threat, we need to examine four distinct technical aspects: propulsion range, guidance, and survivability. The story starts with propulsion. Earlier, North Korean ICBMs and the long-range systems Iran developed from transferred North Korean technology all relied on liquid fuel propulsion. Liquid fuel has major operational implications, but it carries a serious tactical drawback. It requires a lengthy pre-launch fueling process that generates detectable heat and chemical signatures observable by intelligence, satellites, and ground sensors. That preparation window has historically been the vulnerability that US and Israeli preemptive strike doctrine targeted. If you can detect the fueling sequence, you can strike the missile before it launches. The Hwasong-18 eliminates that weakness entirely. It uses a three-stage solid fuel propulsion system, the most advanced solid fuel ICBM architecture North Korea has ever produced. Solid fuel missiles need no fueling sequence. The propellant is already loaded and stored inside the missile body. A road-mobile Hwasong-18 launcher can receive a launch order, erect the missile, and fire within minutes, producing a heat signature only seconds before ignition, far too short for any preventive response. This isn't a minor improvement in survivability. It's an absolute transformation. For liquid fuel systems, preemptive strikes remain theoretically possible, however difficult and risky. For dispersed, road-mobile solid fuel systems spread across Iran, preemption is simply not viable. You cannot target what you cannot locate with enough warning time to strike before launch. The Hwasong-18's range amplifies the threat in ways that reshape the entire regional strategic map. Its demonstrated range confirmed at over 15 kilometers in maximum lofted test configuration means that from any launch position inside Iran, the weapon can strike Tel Aviv, every US base in the Middle East, every NATO capital in Europe, and with optimal positioning targets on the US mainland. Iran previously lacked any system with true intercontinental reach. Acquiring 500 Hwasong-18 missiles transformed the country overnight from a regional military power into one with genuine global strike capability. The guidance system represents the third element of the Hwasong-18 threat profile and the one that most directly undermines existing missile defense architectures. North Korean guidance technology has advanced significantly over the past decade through access to Russian and Chinese technical expertise, combined with the pressure of comprehensive sanctions that forced indigenous development. The Hwasong-18 employs an updated inertial navigation system augmented by stellar-based guidance, a method completely independent of GPS or any other satellite positioning network, U.S. electronic warfare assets. This autonomous capability means American GPS jamming operations, long conducted across the Middle East and responsible for degrading the accuracy of some Iranian missile systems, have no effect on the Hwasong-18's final precision. The weapon steers by the stars, and stars cannot be jammed. Based on analysis of North Korean test data, the missile's terminal accuracy is estimated at a circular error probable of roughly 100 to 150 meters for conventional warhead configurations, with further improvements possible through final guidance updates. Against hardened military targets, this accuracy combined with appropriate warhead yield delivers reliable destruction. Against city-sized targets, precision becomes irrelevant. The weapon will still reach the designated area regardless. The Hwasong-18's survivability architecture addresses the final dimension of the threat. The missile features a maneuverable re-entry vehicle capable of performing evasive maneuvers during the terminal descent phase, greatly complicating intercept solutions for any missile defense system attempting to engage it. America's high-altitude THAAD system, deployed in the region and representing the most capable ballistic missile defense currently available, is optimized against non-maneuvering re-entry vehicles following predictable ballistic trajectories. Against a vehicle executing lateral shifts at hypersonic speeds in the terminal phase, THAAD's intercept probability drops sharply. Israel's Arrow 3 system, its premier exo-atmospheric ballistic missile defense platform, faces the same fundamental challenge. Its intercept algorithms were developed around trajectories that a maneuvering Hwasong-18 re-entry vehicle simply does not follow. Now multiply these characteristics by 500. 500 road mobile launchers dispersed across Iran, each carrying a weapon that cannot be preemptively targeted, cannot be effectively jammed, and cannot be reliably intercepted by any defense system currently fielded in the region. Beyond the immediate technical advantages, the real game changer lies in how these 500 Hwasong-18 missiles reshape Iran's overall strategic posture. For decades, Tehran relied on a complex network of short and medium-range ballistic and cruise missiles, tunnel systems, and proxy forces to project power regionally. Now, with genuine intercontinental strike capability in hand, Iran has vaulted overnight from a regional disruptor to a nuclear peer power. Each launcher weighs approximately 55 tons and measures about 25 meters long, housed in a protective canister on a 9-axle transporter erector vehicle. This design enables rapid dispersal into Iran's rugged mountains, deserts, and underground complexes, turning continuous tracking into a nightmare, even for the most advanced reconnaissance assets. Analysts estimate the missile can carry a payload of 1.25 to 1. 5 tons sufficient for a large nuclear warhead, or in future upgrades, multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, MIRVs. What truly heightens the danger is the combination of solid fuel speed and potential MIRV technology. A single launch can overwhelm defenses with multiple independently maneuvering hypersonic warheads. This forces any defender to treat every incoming missile as a potential multidimensional threat, rapidly exhausting limited interceptor stocks. For Israel, already stretched across multiple fronts, and for the United States, whose global missile defense architecture was never designed to handle hundreds of solid fuel ICBMs from a new direction, the math becomes brutally difficult. In short, these missiles don't just extend Iran's reach, they multiply its deterrent effect exponentially, turning quantity into a qualitative leap that alters the balance of power in the Middle East and beyond. This isn't a threat that can be addressed with incremental upgrades to existing defenses. It demands a fundamental rethinking of every assumption underlying Israeli and American strategic planning. The nuclear dimension, which Iranian officials have neither confirmed nor denied in public statements about the transfer, adds another layer of profound strategic uncertainty. The Hwasong-18 was designed as a nuclear delivery vehicle. Its payload capacity and re-entry vehicle configuration are optimized for nuclear warheads. Whether the delivered missiles carry nuclear, conventional, or simply serve as platforms awaiting warhead, mating that deliberate ambiguity itself creates deterrence. Any Israeli or American military planner uncertain whether an incoming Hwasong-18 carries a nuclear or conventional warhead must treat every launch as a potential nuclear strike and respond accordingly. Maintaining strategic ambiguity is one of the most powerful deterrence tools a state can wield. Iran now possesses it in volume. Washington finds itself paralyzed because every option leads to disaster. The National Security Council emergency session convened just hours after confirmation of the transfer lasted 9 hours. What emerged from those 9 hours wasn't a decision. It was a documented assessment of why every feasible option carries consequences that no administration, regardless of its political makeup or stated commitment to Israel's security, can accept without triggering outcomes worse than the problem it seeks to solve. Let's examine them. To be blunt, Washington's paralysis isn't weakness. It's a rational response to a genuine strategic dilemma with no clean exit. Option 1, a military strike on Iran's ICBM infrastructure. The appeal is understandable. Iran now holds a weapons system of unprecedented threat level. Strike before it can be used. Eliminate the capability through decisive action. That's the logic that has driven U.S. and Israeli preemptive doctrine for decades. The problem lies in the word infrastructure plural and dispersed. The 500 road mobile launchers are not concentrated in fixed, identifiable sites, vulnerable to a limited strike package. They are spread across Iran in constantly shifting positions. A campaign capable of significantly degrading a 500 unit road mobile ICBM force would require enormous scale, hundreds of strikes sustained over days or weeks, while simultaneously targeting Iran's entire military, logistics, and communications infrastructure to prevent dispersal and relocation during the operation. A campaign of that magnitude against Iran isn't a precision military operation, it's a war. A war against a nation that has demonstrated the ability to close the Strait of Hormuz, activate Hezbollah and Houthi networks, simultaneously strike U.S. regional bases with its existing missile arsenal, and now respond with the very ICBM force being targeted. Estimates of economic damage from closing the Strait of Hormuz run into trillions of dollars in the first 90 days alone. Casualty projections for U.S. forces from simultaneous attacks on regional bases run into the thousands. Civilian casualties in Israel from a full Iranian missile retaliation would reach numbers no government could publicly acknowledge without triggering domestic political collapse. Option 1 leads to a regional war whose costs far outweigh any benefits achievable through military action. Option 2, covert action to degrade or destroy the transferred missiles through sabotage, cyber operations, or targeted elimination of key technical personnel. This is the domain where Western intelligence agencies have historically been most effective against Iranian weapons programs. Think Stuxnet against centrifuges, assassinations of nuclear scientists, or covert disruption of missile tests. The issue is that covert actions operate on timelines measured in years, while the strategic threat from 500 already delivered and dispersed ICBMs is immediate. Covert efforts might weaken the program over time. They do not address the existing deterrent reality today in the current strategic environment. Option 3, diplomatic pressure combined with escalated sanctions to force Iran to return or destroy the transferred missiles. This option fails at first glance when viewed through Iran's strategic logic. Tehran did not acquire 500 Hwasong-18 ICBMs only to hand them back under diplomatic pressure. The entire strategic purpose of the purchase was to create a deterrent so robust that military pressure against Iran becomes prohibitively expensive. Asking Iran to surrender that capability in exchange for sanctions relief is asking it to voluntarily return to strategic vulnerability. No Iranian government, regardless of its domestic politics, could accept such a deal. Option 4, accelerate deployment of advanced missile defense systems to the region, adding more THAAD batteries, SM-3 interceptors on Aegis destroyers, and possibly classified next-generation capabilities. This option is the most politically palatable in Washington because it appears decisive without forcing a choice between war and concession. The fundamental problem with option 4 is mathematical. 500 ICBMs. Currently, the United States does not have enough THAAD interceptors deployed worldwide to handle even a fraction of a 500 missile salvo. Building additional capacity at a pace to match the current situation would take years of accelerated production and tens of billions of dollars. Even a theoretically perfect intercept architecture, one capable of stopping every incoming missile, creates a cost asymmetry that favors Iran. Each THAAD interceptor costs around $10 million. Each Hwasong-18 produced with North Korea's industrial efficiency and transferred at strategic partnership pricing costs a fraction of that. Iran can sustain an exchange of fire indefinitely. America's interceptor inventory cannot. Option 5. Direct negotiations with Iran, offering security guarantees and sanctions relief in exchange for commitments not to use the transferred missiles offensively. This is the path no one in official Washington policy-making circles dares admit publicly. Yet every serious strategic analyst recognizes as the only route that avoids catastrophe. Its problem is political. No U.S. administration can enter negotiations with Iran while accepting the premise that Iran has achieved necessary deterrent status. The domestic political price of that admission, appearing to concede to a sanctioned adversary, is one that American political culture has not yet developed the framework to absorb. Therefore, Washington's paralysis stems not from incapacity, but from a strategic situation in which every feasible option leads to outcomes that are either militarily catastrophic, strategically futile, or politically impossible. Administrations do what they usually do when facing genuine strategic dilemmas without good choices. They buy time, demonstrate resolve through show of force military movements without intent for decisive combat, and hope the situation evolves in ways that create new options. Hope is not a strategy, but it is what Washington currently possesses. Beyond Washington's immediate paralysis, this transfer has triggered a deeper crisis, the collapse of confidence in the post-Cold War international order. For decades, the West assumed superior intelligence, technology, and military power would always prevent rogue states from crossing critical thresholds. That illusion has now been shattered. The successful delivery of 500 solid-fuel ICBMs proves that determined actors can achieve strategic breakthroughs by exploiting gaps in great power competition even under heavy sanctions. It reveals the clear limits of Western non-proliferation tools when faced with patient partners willing to endure isolation for long-term survival. More alarmingly, it sends a powerful signal globally. North Korea can profit from its most advanced weapons, while Iran has dramatically upgraded its deterrent without firing a shot. This could accelerate proliferation far beyond the Middle East. We are witnessing not just a regional shift, but the early stages of a more fragmented and dangerous global order, where deterrence is no longer reserved for recognized great powers. Israel's nightmare, revisiting the Samson option. In the deepest recesses of Israeli strategic planning, the classified spaces where doctrine is written and unspoken truths are voiced, there's always existed a concept known as the Samson option. The idea, though never officially acknowledged, is simple, yet carries terrifying logic. If Israel ever faces an existential threat it cannot counter through conventional military means, it retains the option of nuclear retaliation against the source of that threat. The name references the biblical figure who, facing certain death at the hands of his enemies, pulled down the pillars of the temple, destroying himself along with everyone around him. For decades, the Samson option has functioned as Israel's ultimate deterrent. The implicit assurance that no rival coalition could eliminate Israel without facing nuclear retaliation has served as a stabilizing force in the regional strategic environment, even if never stated explicitly. Last night's confirmation of the transfer has forced Israeli strategic planners to confront a question that the logic of the Samson option was never designed to answer. What do you do when an adversary achieves a deterrent posture that renders even the threat of nuclear retaliation insufficient to prevent existential pressure? An Iran armed with 500 nuclear-capable Hwasong-18 ICBMs does not fear Israeli nuclear retaliation in the same way a conventionally armed Iran would. If Iran can absorb an Israeli nuclear strike and still deliver a nuclear response against Israeli territory, the entire deterrent logic of the Samson option collapses. Mutual assured destruction cannot deter a party that has decided the price of confrontation is acceptable. Israel's strategic community is now grappling with a threat structure that its entire doctrine was not built to address a peer-level nuclear deterrence relationship with a regional adversary. Israel has maintained its position as the region's sole nuclear power throughout modern history. The deterrent advantages of that monopoly are now being challenged in ways unprecedented in Israel's strategic experience. The immediate operational response has been to activate the highest alert levels across all branches of the Israeli military. 3 Arrow missile batteries have been placed on continuous launch-ready status. U.S. supplied THAAD systems have been repositioned to optimize coverage against Iranian ICBM trajectories. Underground command facilities have been fully activated with round-the-clock staffing. Israel's nuclear-capable submarine force, the ultimate guarantor of the Samson option, has been dispersed to patrol positions across the Mediterranean and Red Sea. These measures represent maximum combat readiness. They are not a solution. They reflect the posture of a nation that understands it faces an existential strategic challenge with no immediate answer. Domestic politics inside Israel are erupting intensely. The ruling coalition, already under enormous internal pressure from the prolonged costs of multiple simultaneous military campaigns, is fracturing along lines that the transfer confirmation has exposed and deepened. Hardline coalition members are demanding immediate military action regardless of cost. More cautious voices argue that military action without a clear path to success would accelerate precisely the escalation Israel seeks to prevent. The opposition, sensing political opportunity, is calling for a national emergency government with broader coalition representation. Netanyahu now faces an unprecedented military crisis, a domestic political crisis, and an international diplomatic environment, less supportive than at any point in his tenure, all while being forced to make agonizing decisions. Decisions made under time, pressure, and information uncertainty would challenge any leader. The choices he makes in the coming days will shape Israel's strategic position for a generation. The Israeli public is undergoing a psychological shift that no official reassurance can fully contain. The limitations of the Iron Dome system have remained manageable as long as the broader strategic framework held. 500 enemy ICBMs potentially carrying nuclear warheads cannot be managed through mindset adjustments. This is a genuine existential threat that ordinary Israelis perceive, and no government communication strategy can alter that perception when the underlying reality supports it. Economic consequences are already emerging. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange opened sharply lower. The shekel has depreciated against the dollar at a pace not seen since the 2006 Lebanon War. Foreign investment inflows have halted across multiple sectors. The tourism industry, already devastated by prolonged conflict, has virtually ground to a halt. Credit rating agencies have begun reassessments. The economic engine that funds Israel's defense capabilities is facing simultaneous pressure from the military crisis and shifting risk assessments in financial markets. Israel is a nation truly in distress, and that distress matches the reality it confronts. The New World Order. What do 500 ICBMs mean for global power? Let's set aside the immediate crisis for a moment and consider what this transfer means for the structure of the global order, because its repercussions extend far beyond the Middle East, far beyond the Israel-Iran conflict, and touch the foundational assumptions that have governed international relations since the end of the Cold War. The post-Cold War nuclear order rested on a specific framework: a small number of recognized nuclear states bound by non-proliferation treaty obligations operating within a deterrent structure managed primarily by the United States and Russia as the principal guarantors. Every U.S. foreign policy effort for the past 30 years has aimed at preserving that framework, preventing other states from acquiring nuclear weapons or delivery systems that could complicate the managed deterrent structure. Iran's acquisition of ICBMs from North Korea represents the most serious breach of that framework in the post-Cold War era. Not necessarily because Iran has confirmed nuclear warheads, that question remains deliberately ambiguous, but because a non-NPT state has transferred 500 ICBM delivery vehicles to another state, openly defying every sanction, arms control mechanism, and every diplomatic pressure tool that Washington and its allies could bring to bear. And it succeeded. The transfer occurred. The missiles are now in Iranian hands. Nothing Washington or Tel Aviv does now can reverse that fact. The message this success sends globally is one that every government concerned with nuclear proliferation is now processing simultaneously. The U.S.-led non-proliferation framework, the architecture of sanctions, export controls, intelligence operations, and diplomatic pressure designed precisely to prevent this kind of transfer has been demonstrably defeated. Not challenged, defeated. Every state that has ever weighed the costs and benefits of pursuing advanced weapons capabilities, despite U.S. pressure, is now updating its calculations. North Korea's transfer to Iran demonstrates that the costs in that equation, sanctions, isolation, diplomatic pressure, can be endured and ultimately converted into strategic advantage. And the benefit side, a deterrent posture that makes U.S. military action prohibitively expensive, is entirely achievable. This is the proliferation logic that American policymakers have feared for decades and spent enormous resources to prevent. Overnight, it became concrete reality. Russia is watching these developments with unconcealed satisfaction. The erosion of U.S. strategic credibility in the Middle East, now compounded by the clear failure of the non-proliferation framework, reduces pressure on every front where Russia faces U.S.-backed opposition. Every percentage point of U.S. strategic attention devoted to the Middle East, ICBM crisis, is a percentage point not devoted to Ukraine, not devoted to NATO's eastern flank, and not devoted to deterrence in the Pacific. China's perspective is more complex and forward-looking. Beijing has publicly opposed Iranian nuclear weapons acquisition, not out of ideological alignment with non-proliferation norms, but out of pragmatic recognition that a nuclear-armed Iran would introduce unpredictability in a critical energy region where China holds massive economic stakes. The Hwasong-18 transfer, which involves a delivery system rather than confirmed warheads, occupies a gray space that China can navigate diplomatically, while noting the precedent it sets regarding the effectiveness of defying U.S. pressure. More importantly, Beijing is studying America's response to this crisis as a live exercise to calibrate its own calculations regarding Taiwan. If Washington demonstrates that it cannot or will not take decisive military action, even when facing the transfer of 500 ICBMs to a hostile state, what does that imply about America's willingness to act militarily over Taiwan, a perpetuated potential conflict, carrying the risk of direct great power confrontation? Chinese analysts in Beijing are drawing conclusions from Washington's response right now. Those conclusions will shape Chinese decision-making in the Pacific for years to come. Gulf states are experiencing a strategic earthquake. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and every other Gulf monarchy that built its security on American guarantees now faces clear evidence that those guarantees have limits, and that Iran separated from key Gulf population centers only by the narrow waters of the Persian Gulf, now possesses weapons capabilities that fundamentally alter the regional deterrence equation. The pace of diplomatic reconciliation between Gulf states and Iran, already visible in the China-brokered rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, will likely accelerate. States that cannot rely on absolute U.S. military superiority for security must find ways to accommodate the strongest regional power. With 500 Hwasong-18 ICBMs, Iran has clearly established itself as that power. Pakistan, the only Muslim-majority state with nuclear weapons, is watching with a unique mix of concern and strategic interest. A nuclear-capable Iran in its neighborhood is altering Pakistan's own deterrence calculations in ways that the government in Islamabad is not yet prepared to address publicly. The global non-proliferation framework, already damaged by North Korea's nuclear program, the collapse of the JCPOA, and its gradual erosion, is now in transition. A new framework will eventually emerge, but transitional periods, the interval between the collapse of the old order and the construction of the new, have historically been the most dangerous times in international relations. States act amid uncertainty. Mistakes become more likely. Margins for error shrink precisely when risks are highest. We are in that transitional phase. The transfer of 500 Hwasong-18 ICBMs from North Korea to Iran did not cause the current instability, but it has accelerated and deepened it in ways that will shape the strategic environment for the next decade. 500 road-mobile solid-fuel Hwasong-18 ICBMs with maneuverable re-entry vehicles, autonomous guidance, potential nuclear payload, dispersed across Iranian territory, immune to preemptive attack, and resistant to interception by any defense system currently deployed in the region. This is the strategic reality that Israel, the United States, and the entire Western-backed regional order confronted this morning. It is a reality that did not exist 72 hours ago. It is a reality that cannot be erased, sanctioned, or eliminated without triggering consequences far greater than the problem they are trying to solve. What happens next will not be decided by who possesses the most advanced technology or the largest defense budget, although both matter. It will be decided by who has the clearest strategic vision, the most disciplined decision-making, and the ability to accept uncomfortable truths about a world that has changed in irreversible ways. Iran has spent 45 years preparing for this moment. Patience, self-reliance, and the willingness to endure enormous sacrifices in pursuit of strategic goals have all converged in the image of 500 ICBMs sitting inside Iran's fortified facilities, pointed outward at a world that underestimated the resolve of a civilization that has never accepted subjugation. The old Middle East is gone. The old non-proliferation order is finished. Whatever replaces them will be built on the foundation of this moment. What is your assessment of the next steps? Will Washington find a diplomatic path that acknowledges Iran's deterrent capability without appearing to surrender? Will Israel take military action despite the costs? Will the nuclear threshold be crossed? And if so, by whom? Leave your most serious analysis in the comments. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand what's really happening. Subscribe to the channel and send channel, because in a dangerous world like this, sharp analyses like these are not optional, they are essential. Until the next update, stay alert, stay ahead, and never stop asking the important questions.